welcome to Games Now. My name is Anna-Kaisa Kultima. We are here at the Aalto University campus streaming a game jam kickoff today. Yes, we're super excited to have our first jam of the season. We have two speakers, and one of them is my lovely co-host Solip Park. If you haven't jammed before, this might be your chance to jam. We are welcoming everybody from a beginner level to complete newbie level to all the way to the professional level. So everybody can join this jam. I haven't heard about this kind of jams before ever. So our special theme of the jam is Finland meets South Korea. So we are drawing from two design traditions, the Finnish game design tradition and the South Korean design tradition today on this jam kickoff. Games Now is an open lecture series run by Aalto University, and anybody can join that. We have about 7 Finnish universities utilizing this in the courses, but we also have lots of professionals joining in, also listening to the new stuff. We love to cover fresh topics, and I do think that Finland and South Korea are very much fresh topics too, even though we are actually now diving into history today, which is kind of strange, but also very, very topical, because there's a lot of rising of the kind of drawing from different kinds of cultural heritages. And I do believe that game heritage is also a cultural heritage.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people might think that that's a radical thing to say, but not anymore, I guess. So yeah.
I'm very
What do
excited
we-
as well.
Yeah. So a couple of pointers for the jam. This is a 1 week long jam, but you can choose to jam whichever duration you want to. So game jams are interesting format. You can have a very short jam, for instance, like I used to say 1 hour, but there are shorter jams these days. So from about 1 hour to about maybe a month that the game jams can be. And you can choose on this jam whether you use the about 6 days fully, or you use, for instance, just 1 hour. And I think that the lectures today also are something that you can enjoy whether you choose not to jam. So it's not for the jammers only. Game jams are open for anybody to use any kind of technology, specifically our jams. We don't limit anything, so you can choose anywhere between low code, no code, Bitsy, Construct, to Unreal that we had on the first lecture of the season as well. So any kind of professional tools or unprofessional or hobbyist tools are okay. You can also just program the game yourself if you are into that.
Exactly, yeah.
And what else? Yeah, we're using Discord a lot.
Yeah, so we have a Discord server, a Games Now Discord server, where the online jam is actually happening. And be mindful, this is a jam that is happening online in Finland and Korea at the same time at the moment. So hi to those Koreans who are 7 hours ahead of us than Finland. So it's a little bit of nighttime for them. But don't worry, Discord is there for us, and we're a slightly night timer when it comes to jammer and game. So let's see how this turns out. This is the first time ever we're doing this, so
yeah, as a collaboration. Obviously, if you're somewhere else in the world, that's completely fine too. So you don't have to be in South Korea or in Finland in order to participate to the jam. Just join the Discord, find people to jam with, or just do a solo jam and show your progress in our channels. What we go with the teaming after this lecture kickoff is that we do strongly recommend that you would test out a little bit to have international teams. So we recommend people to have like 1 South Korean, 1 Finnish person. But if you run out of the South Koreans and the Finns, you can also just jam without them, I guess.
Yeah, we highly encourage you to go to intercultural exchange from here. And also kudos for South Korean collaborator coming from Korea. It's a Changgang College college over there in South Korea, in Icheon. And then there's also Korean students, game degree students line up, and they're waiting for us to start the brainstorming session together on Discord.
Yeah. So I'm super. I've heard a lot of nice things about the school that we're collaborating today. We have a lot of other Finnish schools as well, and I'm really excited to see what the teams will be making, or the talented solo artists as well. Anyway, so all of that happens in Discord after this session. There is a schedule that we'll share there. So if you don't know yet where the Discord is, go to gamesnow.aalto.fi and find the community links there. There is also an invite link for the Discord and all the other channels. We have also YouTube where you can check all our previous content of the jams and the lectures. I guess that's kind of the short intro to game jams that we are running. We're gonna have more information there, a lot of help stuff, also links, additional material from these lectures as well, so for you to use. The kind of thing with game jams is that there is typically one word theme, but that's not what we do here. We're gonna give you 2 presentations to draw from. And I have, like last time we had Solip drawing really nice drawings, but this time I'll be drawing notes on my iPad, interpreting the lectures that you're about to hear, so that we get this kind of a list of things to mix in terms of the design traditions. And we'll see what's going to be there. I have a little bit of a kind of information of that, but we'll see how I'm able to interpret that into something easy and a bit more challenging for the jammers to use. Okay, that's a lot about the jam. Oh, one more thing. We obviously have to have a giveaway. Sorry, we have to have a giveaway. So if you're interested in, for instance, books in your library, we have books about the Finnish game history. Also something that our guest speaker Mikko, who will be presenting soon, has been part of. So these are in Finnish and in English as well.
And in Korean.
And then there is another book that is about confessions of the game designers from Finland in Korean. So we're gonna have a little bit of engagement with these giveaways in our Discord channel, so make sure that you join that too. All right, let's kind of get closer to the actual content that we're providing today. So we will start with our guest speaker. Let's have Mikko also on to the screen. So hello Mikko, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're looking forward to have you kind of share your personal outtakes for the Finnish game history. But tell us a little bit. I think you had a slide about your intro, but tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, I've yet to really find that out, but I'm here because I've been researching the history of Finnish gaming and games in Finland on a very sort of layman level for the past 30 years or so. I was one of the first ones to start collecting games, and then that involved into creating a sort of chronology and researching things, and then that culminated sort of in the formation of the Finnish Museum of Games in Vapikki, Tampere. That's been my life's work, more or less. So that's why I'm here, and I want to give you a sort of a different presentation today, because there is a tradition to explain and to talk about history in a certain sort of framework where you have the canonized games that you always mention, and I decided I won't be doing much of that today. Instead, I've picked something that I thought the jammers might find interesting, or some of it might be challenging to sort of incorporate into the final product, but some of it might be interesting anyway. So that's what I've done. So it's a very, very new content from you. If guys, you have seen any of the Mikko's lectures, this is a different one. Yeah, and I did that entirely on purpose for this.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to it. I've been enjoying working with you with the museum project. So we're super proud of the Finnish Museum of Games, which is like a couple of hours from here. Also, Mikko is from Tampere, and there's a lot of game stuff happening in it. It could be almost like a capital of games in Finland, because all the stuff happens there. But there's like 100 games in the exhibition, and most of them are playable.
Yeah, at least like 3/4 are playable. And the exhibition keeps changing, so even if you've been there once, it's worth coming again, because we keep adding stuff and replacing stuff. So.
And the museum focuses on games from Finland.
Yes.
Local history.
Yeah, and the earliest piece is from 1800, was it 60 or something? So it goes beyond the independence of or forming the state of Finland.
Yeah.
and it goes all the way to the current day. So the current changing exhibition there is about Noita, the indie game that took quite long to develop, but it's super marvelous. And maybe we can maybe share about that also in the end notes where I can talk about, because I curated that exhibition, so I know a lot of the things about it.
Yeah,
but
there's a note about Noita here.
Good,
Yeah,
good, good.
Coming up soon.
But the thing that you share, so we've seen Solip in our lectures quite many times already. First time that Solip will have a lecture about, you share one piece, and that is to be together with the local histories in an exhibition mode. So Solip, you've been also working on a game history in South Korea.
I will probably going to introduce myself a bit more during my presentation, but I'm also very excited about showing you guys some of the historical remarks of Korean games.
Yes.
And there's also a museum in South Korea about game history. So for those who are in Korea, might as well check it out.
Yeah, that's super cool. I want to go there as soon as all these kind of restrictions are completely calmed down. Anyway, so one of the things that in game jams and in this kind of expert mode of giving lectures, we embrace the subjectivity. So I'm really looking forward to your personal takes on the histories instead of this canon way of just always saying the same pieces, because there's so much to draw from, obviously. There's a lot of the pieces that are interesting. So I think that I've taken too much space already, and let's give the space to our guest speaker, Mikko. And we'll see what you have to share.
Okay, let's get started. My topic is quirky and possibly interesting Finnish digital games. And well, we already touched on this a bit with Anna-Kaisa, but I'll start by just explaining who I am and why I am here. So, as I said, I've been collecting, cataloging digital games, game systems since the early 1990s. I was probably one of the first ones in Finland to do that. The circles were very small, almost non-existent. And then in 1999, we founded Pelikonepeijoonit, which is a game collector collective. And it consists of the 3 founding members. It's very unofficial. We've never registered ourselves, but it's sort of the thing that we want to present ourselves under. And it's me, Manu Pärssinen, and my brother Ville Heinonen. And the launch of that website, it came at a very sort of fortunate time, because this was the retro thing was just picking up steam, and we were able to network very well and find the people who were into the hobby in Finland, and we found out a lot of new things in a very short period of time, just by giving it this sort of central hub, and everything we've done since that time has more or less been connected to that. If you Google us, you will now find our very defunct website, and it's a bit of a shame, because we used to have a big site that cataloged everything we had, but it's been in a state of neglect for the best part of 10 years. But it's mostly because we've more or less done what we set out to achieve with the website, because the museum is now a thing, because we originally set it up as the Arctic Computer and Console Museum. And when we did that, we had the idea of a museum someday, but we never in our wildest dreams thought it would be something so great and so institutional as the Finnish Museum of Games. But we're working on that. By 2030, we'll have a new website. From a professional perspective, I've been working as a game reviewer and journalist and lay researcher since the early 2000s, which also I landed in because of Pelikonepeijoonit. I got my first writing gig because someone found our website. And I've written for websites, magazines, and even TV shows, reviewing games, writing about history and things like that. Nowadays, I do Retro Rewind magazine, Scrolly magazine, v2.fi. Those are the 3 things. I work in another field. I'm a translator, but this is my dear hobby. And yes, the crowning achievement of my career so far in this field has been the establishment of the Finnish Museum of Games in 2016. I kickstarted the project. I invited the research group together, Anna-Kaisa included. And then I also managed the crowdfunding campaign. And back then we also set the crowdfunding record for Finland, because we raised almost 86,000 euros, which was an unprecedented amount. We almost doubled the previous record. And I think it has only been overtaken by other museum projects and things of that nature. And it was the first time a public institution in Finland did crowdfunding, because the city of Tampere arranged that. So it was groundbreaking in many ways, and I was very happy.
That was so super. Yes, that was perfect.
Yeah, it was quite the thing, and not my achievement. It was the achievement of all the people who participated and the museum planning team and so on. But I do take credit for getting the ball rolling.
And you led the project perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But yeah, on to what I'm supposed to talk about today. So I'm going to tell you about the history of Finnish game development, but I'm only going to give you some notes about how it went, because, like I said, I'm not going to repeat the canon again. I'm instead going to go briefly through what it was, what happened, and so on, and then I'll pick some games that are supposed to be food for thought for you. So the first thing to understand is that historically Finland was very much a nation of bedroom programmers. We're a small country with a small population. There was no major industry in this field until very, very late. So the first games were written by individual hobbyists who just wanted to do something, and there was also this sort of small hobbies scene around the different brands of home computers that started coming out in the very late 70s, very early 80s. So people were writing their own software for them because there was nothing available. The first commercially published Finnish game was from 1979 that we now know of. It was called Chessmac, which was a game of chess for the Finnish designed Telmac computer. And it plays a good game of chess, and it's incredibly slow. That's what you need to know about it. You can watch a video about it at the Museum of Games. You can't play it because we played it on an emulator and at 800% speed, and it took about 10 minutes to think of one move. So it's not really a piece for the museum guests.
I thought that it was like 20 minutes for a move, but I was completely too optimistic.
Yeah, because it was like we accelerated it very much, but it's still so it's a thinking person's game.
Oh yeah.
And
well, but they used to play it with letters. So it at that time relatively fast.
Yeah.
I think that they still play it with letters, not to
they do,
downplay that.
And another thing you need to know about Finland is the Commodore 64. There is no getting around the fact that there is only one system in Finland at one time, and originally it was the Commodore 64. There were other home computers on the market. Some of them did okay, but Finland had the most Commodore per capita in the whole world, and it was because of successful efforts by the importer, the distributor, and just it was a good product. I'm not going to argue against it, but anyway, the dominance of the C64, it was remarkable, and it sort of defined that era. And also, what it did was it was so popular that we were very late into the game console game, because there was, like, by the time the United States were already like full on Nintendo, there was no market, because everyone had a C64. The games were not materially different on the Nintendo, and you could copy the games on the C64. So that was a very good value proposition for the parents who were buying the systems. And on the same wave that was the C64, Commodore also introduced the Amiga 500, which was the successor system. It didn't do as well, but it still did very well. So Finland was very much a Commodore nation up until the death of the Amiga. And
oh no, it's not dead.
It will never die. The Amiga lives on. It's amazing. It's simply like Linus Torvalds put it. that thing will never die.
Yeah.
But
It's
but-
remarkable how, like, after decades of being in the storage rooms, like somewhere in the very cold, also my brothers, well, Commodore 128 actually, but still the Commodore 64 games were playable.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
yeah. They are well-built machines.
I guess like a nuclear war wouldn't even kill them.
Could be a challenge, but yeah.
We'll
Yeah,
see about that.
So that was the thing, and another thing was that, like in other countries, the computer press, they were very supportive of people writing their own software. They would print your code, they would pay you for it, and it was a sizable amount of money. Like Linus Torvalds had his software published in Microbitti, and that started his career in a way. And a lot of the people who wrote games at that time, they also wrote articles, they reviewed games and so on. And if you browse through the pages of Microbitti, for example, you will see people like Pasi Hyttönen, Jukka Tapanimäki, Ilari Kuittinen, so on. So
The
anyone,
legendary-
anyone who's anyone is over there, and that was a big thing. So, and there were also game competitions, like Pasi Hyttönen, who was one of the first commercially employed programmers in Finland, because he was assigned to write the Uno Turhapuro licensed game. He won a game competition, and he used that to get in on Amersoft and get his game
Uno
published.
Turhapuro is a very silly, I would say very silly nowadays, back in the day as well, but Finnish movie about this kind of a loser guy.
Yeah, deadbeat guy, and there was a licensed game made about it. I won't go into that in too much detail because it's a bit of a meme in the C64 circles, because it's been known as one of the most difficult games in the world.
I played it once and it was very difficult indeed.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
almost
it's
impossible.
not-
but
it's
I'm
not
yeah,
easy.
but I'm inviting you to the Museum of Games to see that, because we have great exhibits about it. We have the original master disc. We have correspondence between the authors, and you can play the game.
Yes. And that is part of the canon, actually.
Yeah,
I think
it
that
is.
it's,
It is
it's
very much
repeated
part
a
of
lot.
the canon.
Yeah.
And and so the first larger international release from Finland, it was called Sanction by Stavros Vasulas, and it was in 1986 on the Commodore 64, of course, and that was followed by similar releases from different authors. So Stavros got 3 games out in a very short period of time. Then Jukka Tapanimäki came out with Octapolis, Netherworld, Zamzara, and there were others. So that was the explosion of the bedroom programmers from Finland. But then it was sort of a slow period after that. There was no like exponential growth. It stayed sort of in small circles up until, let's say, Max Payne in 2001, which was the first real AAA title, and then there was also Supreme Snowboarding, Transworld Snowboarding from Housemarque, which was big as well. But yeah, Max Payne, I'll say, is the first Finnish real AAA production that really broke the computer game development into the mainstream. And then of course we had the mobile dev explosion with starting with Sumea Digital Chocolate, then going on Mr. Good Living, and then we move on to Red Lynx and Rovio, Supercell, and so on.
Yeah.
But this is also in the canon, and it's very easy to find, and you won't see any of these games in my picks
Yeah.
today. Yeah, and that's not to like disrespect them.
No.
These are great products. They are well worth knowing, but I wanted to give you something else.
That's very nice.
So I picked 2 things that I thought are fairly common traits in Finnish games that are not probably not AAA, but some of them are AA definitely. But some features, quirks, and I put them in 2 groups. And the first group is demo scene aesthetics. And we were talking about this with Anna-Kaisa, and she had trouble grasping this at first, what it means. But
Well, I do have some idea, but I know it's difficult.
Yeah.
You have to be looking at a lot of the demos, and
Yeah.
also like I do think that there might be some people don't know what is a demo as well. So
yeah,
maybe
so we'll start with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've heard of game demos, and this is something completely different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah.
So
For
and
those who are in Korea, especially, listen
yeah,
up.
yeah.
This
So
is-
a demo is a demonstration. It's a real-time program that's being run on a computer, but it's non-interactive. Its sole purpose is to demonstrate the skill of the authors.
Mm.
It's to make the machine do something that it probably shouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
And the Wikipedia definition is very good. So I've for once I've copied Wikipedia verbatim.
Mm.
So the demo scene is an international computer art subculture focused on producing demos, which are self-contained, sometimes extremely small computer programs that produce audiovisual presentations. The purpose of a demo is to show off programming, visual art, and musical skills. Demos and other demo scene productions, such as graphics, music videos, and games, are shared at festivals known as demo parties, voted on by those who attend, and they are released online. So, for example, Assembly, which has now been sadly cancelled 2 times in a row as a live event, is the oldest demo party in the world that still has a demo competition.
Mm. Run in Finland.
Yeah, greetings to Pehu.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. These demos started off. They are linked to games in that the first demos were probably attached to games, because when games were cracked and distributed, they would put the crackers would put their name before the software loaded. And then they started thinking about, okay, fancier ways to present the name and to present their group and where to buy their products or where to get them. And so they started decorating them. And after a while, they realized, okay, well, these are cool just as products by themselves. We don't really need the game. So those became like intros and then full-on demos, and you had mega demos where there are multiple parts and so on. And so that gave rise to the demo scene. And this is I'll have to say, this is a very European thing.
Yeah.
Because for most people outside of Europe, when I've talked with Americans, for example, it's known there. People, because the crackers, they were on the Apple II. There were these crack intros were also there. But for the mainstream population, it was an odd thing. Like, why would you do something why would you work for free, basically, just to create a visual representation? Because it's not like in recent years, it's been thought that, okay, the demo scene is a coder factory for the game industry, but that's not the case. That's not why people joined the demo scene. They joined it because they wanted to do something cool, and they wanted to have their own subculture with other like-minded people, and that was the point.
Yeah, a lot of the Finnish devs have their history in the demo parties. The bigger companies like or the older companies like, for instance, Housemarque and Rovio, not Rovio, but Remedy, they are very heavily rooted to the demo scene in their kind of birth stories. I don't know, is it because of the Commodore 64 and the Amigas and so on that the other ends of the world, they were so much more cartridge kind of heavy, so it's not as easy to crack those. I don't know if that's the case.
Could be. There's a lot of research into that, but it's more about, like, when you're using a cartridge system like a game console, you're consuming the product.
The game, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas with the demos and with copying and such, you are more sort of creating it yourself. You have to have a certain level of skill to even copy the stuff over. That's a barrier compared to just purchasing something and then popping it in the system. And again, this is not to put down other ways to use the computer, but there was an absolute upside to the widespread piracy as well, and the fact that people were getting used to handling files and using the computer, if only for as a means of getting free games.
Yeah.
But because that was the way that these intros also spread, because people would copy games and then they would have the crack intro, and while some part of the population they couldn't be quick enough to click on the mouse or the joystick or the spacebar to get rid of the demo, but I remember, like, as a 12-year-old, I was fascinated by these things. Okay, what are these? Why is this here? And then when I saw my first real demos, okay, this is the thing.
For me, it took like a couple of decades to understand that those things that I saw in the Commodore 128 games on my brother's computer, they were not part of the games, the intros in the beginning, which is like sometimes they were like cooler than the games themselves.
Yeah. Many a time.
Yep.
Yeah, and like I said in my presentation, the demo scene and game development, they are not synonymous in Finland, but they are very closely linked. Like when you go to assembly, and especially if you go to Boozembly, which is a side event that's never organized, but it just happens, then you will find people there who are very strongly in the demo scene and also in the game business.
One thing that is kind of the shared in the kind of a canonized history of the Finnish game industry is that the why we were so big in mobile games is that we were so good at kind of compressing the games into small because of the influence of the demo scene, I guess. Because it's like there's still like 4K, 4K, 8K, 1K,
256 byte. That's a new thing because 4K is like bloatware by this time. Yeah, because in 4K you get music and everything, but 256 is where it's at.
Smaller file than your email.
Yeah.
And you fit into this like a music video being in there. So it's like super impressive.
There's a term for this. It's called size coding.
Optimization on top.
Yeah. So that must have been an influence also for us to create the games for the early mobile phones.
Yeah. Absolutely sure. So I thought the best way to introduce something like this to you is to just show you a demo. This is extension by Pygmy Projects from 1993. It won the Assembly 93 Amiga demo competition. Second Reality by Future Crew won the PC side, and Future Crew then became Remedy. But this is the Amiga one, and I'm showing it because the Amiga is a great system that had a great effect on me, and my entire life would have been different if I'd been in another system. Yeah, because that's where I met my best friends, and we met through the Amiga.
Yeah,
and it's a thing that
the
you
community.
if you know, you know. So I wanted to show you this because it's 3.5 minutes, and I won't be talking too much over it, but to some extent, it's just this audio-visual overload thing, and you'll notice like some things. Hopefully, let's see. So here we go. I cut it off a bit because there's an intro with a semi-naked woman, so I thought probably not for the best.
Does it roll?
It should. There's an intro with music.
Oh, okay.
Here we go.
There you go. Right.
So here we are in the dot tunnel, and
these kind of tunnels are very typical for
the
demos.
and there's a reason why I chose this demo, and I'll get to that.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is a capture, so we cannot see that the music is actually influencing the output. So the screen flashes in time with the bass drum on a real Amiga, but it just goes out of sync on the capture. And this is like a dot landscape type of thing. And this is all running on the Amiga 500, which is a 7 megahertz computer from 1985. So fairly low spec, but it was a very suitable demo platform because of certain characteristics that it had. It could multitask. It could it had like one of the first consumer grade GPUs. It was just two-dimensional at that point, but it had separate chips that could handle the screen display, and also it could play audio with very little CPU overhead.
Yeah, we could get a bit of the higher of the music on the stream, I guess. To
yeah. Anyway,
Lassi, if you can put the okay, good. So I've been like I have never done a demo or any intros, any of those things, but you kind of, it takes a bit of time to understand the visual language of these, and they have the technical reasons. So I find it fascinating that demo scene is kind of tied to the, like, in order to really fully understand it, you would be needing to do one, I guess.
Not necessarily. Well, I've done some like really bad demos, but anyway, I've mostly been like a hang-around member for the best part of 30 years now.
Yeah, but you've seen them made, basically.
Yeah. And I've been
people explain why this like a ball or a ball and a square.
The thing you always need to understand, and what's not immediately obvious for the modern viewer, is that this is basically things that you're not supposed to be able to do.
Yeah.
Because these are things that the hardware is not specifically built for. You're going out of spec, by doing something like this. Like the Amiga has no 3D acceleration, but you're doing 3D things with it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, and also what you are doing in a demo is you are cheating. You are constantly cheating.
You're trying to find like loopholes.
Yeah, and you are doing something else that looks like the thing that you are showing on the screen.
Yeah.
And this is very, very true, like on the C64 in particular, which is a relatively slow machine with relatively low spec.
Yeah.
So if you are creating something that looks like it's coming from a higher end system, you are cheating.
Yeah.
And that's a very like necessary skill also in game development. And like I said, another thing about demos, not in all traditions, there are different ones, but especially the Amiga demos, the action is in sync with the music. So the music changes when the mood of the demo changes.
Yeah.
You get these sort of syncs with the bass drum or whatnot, because that was on the Amiga, that was relatively easy to do, like not trivial, but it was easier than on other systems, because you could sync the whole thing, and it was in sync with the screen update. And so yeah.
I also find it fascinating that the 90s music videos actually incorporated some of the aesthetics, and I don't know what is the connection there, but...
Well, for example, there was a Finnish group called Dance Nation, and the guy who then went on to join Poets of the Fall, he was in the demo scene as captain.
Oh. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is a correlation.
Anyway, and their music videos, they were produced on the Amiga.
Right.
Because the Amiga output TV frequency.
Yeah.
It was a 50 hertz system, so it was easy to record, and you could do like a Genlock thing where you could overlay the Amiga graphics on video. So that was it was used in a lot of TV stations at that time, because.
Yeah. So if you're my age, somewhere between 30 and 50, you probably seen this in TV without even being a computer nerd or geek.
Oh.
Yeah, there are a lot of things, and at the same time, like the Atari ST was also widely used because it had a MIDI MIDI interface.
But that also happens now, that the game making tools like Unreal is used in TV production. So it's always been there, I guess. Then.
Yeah.
Super.
So let's.
So I wouldn't, as a jammer, I wouldn't be able to do something that I'm not supposed to be able to do with a computer. That's way beyond my skill.
Computers can do basically everything.
But I could definitely put like squares and something like a tunnel thing, I guess. For
So let's have a look at this video then. So this is a game, a commercial game, from 1993, the same year, called Stardust, and it was published by Bloodhouse. Bloodhouse then joined forces with a company called Terramark, and they became Housemark. And this was the first game in the series, and I'll just show you a bit of the gameplay. This is very roughly cut, but the intro, it's just like the Star Wars scroller. The Star Wars scroller was a demo effect as well originally, and so they've used the Star Wars scroller, and the copy here is it's amusing because Professor Schaumann is probably the most twisted professor ever. He's about to enslave the local galaxy and harm the Princess Boy Levy. And now Boy Levy was a margarine brand. So they put that in as a joke. And this was the commercial release.
I guess if you go assembly these days, you could still see these humorous entries a lot. There's like a lot of things.
And here's the gameplay. It's an asteroids type of thing, an asteroids clone, you could say. But see the graphics. They are they've been rendered on an Amiga in real 3D. So these are real graphics, and then we'll see the resistance. When you complete 6 levels, which I can very rarely do, you get the tunnel sequence. And now this is something that blew everyone away at that time. So just to prep you for it, because this again, this is not something an Amiga 500 is supposed to be able to do. Because look at this.
Oh, it's like 3D rendered.
It's a complete lie.
Oh, wow.
It is a complete and utter lie that looks very nice. It's a total of 6 frames of animation copied across.
It looks awesome even today.
So that was that was, and this is also a demo thing at the end.
Wow.
So this is all demo scene aesthetics. You can see that the guys knew their Amiga, they knew what they were doing, and this sort of tunnel effect, you can see a version of it was in the extension demo. There were other demos with similar tunnel effects, but I chose a Finnish one just to prove the point. And but anyway, this was very much in the vein of these demo scene inspired things, and these sort of I think it was to do with the Amiga Copper and such. So what they did was they used these tricks to create this sort of illusion, and it was very successful and got very nice reviews back in the day. And you've heard of Remedy Entertainment, you've heard of Max Payne, Alan Wake, Control, Quantum Break. Not many of you have probably heard of Death Rally, which was their first release in 1996. And it's just a racing game, basically. But here you can see the demo scene influence in the cars, how nicely they are shaded. And this runs better on real hardware than it looks on the video. And also you can hear it, because the music, it's all demo scene.
Right.
And so what Finnish games at this time, a lot of them were like, they were like taking a sort of a simple idea and then polishing it to perfection with the skills they had learned, and just to make it impressive. Because I remember when the first people in the demo scene started talking about, okay, we're going to make games, everyone knew they were going to be great. Because these people had a very deep understanding of how the system works, what you need to do to coax the very last bit of performance out of it. And so they created this thing. And this was a shareware game. A lot of the games that we're going to talk about were shareware.
Yeah.
Stardust was commercial, fully commercial, but Death Rally was shareware. And the point was that you would get a limited version of the game for free that you could share. Doom is a very famous example. Then when you paid, you would get the rest of the episodes. And that was the same here. You could play a short demo and then buy the full version. And this was published by Apogee in the United States, who specialized in this kind of thing. And
it was the free games of the, like a free-to-play games of the time, the sharewares.
Yeah. But yeah, that's Death Rally. And
was Death Rally also was there also like what is it called? Well, the wheel itself. Could you play that already? It was like a later Death Rallies and other car games from Finland. Was it like?
No,
this is
just a keyboard control thing. Yeah, because it's a top-down view thing. Well, you could, but there's no additional benefit to be had. Yeah.
I'm not a car game person, but still, I know that.
But let's move on. So, to conclude the demo scene aesthetics, we're going to fast forward 20 years. So, like I said, Bloodhouse, Terramark joined forces to form Housemark, which was the oldest independent studio in Finland. I don't know if it still counts because Sony bought them. But anyway, Sony bought them just recently. They became an in-house studio after the PS5 game Returnal, which was one of the better PS5 release games or near release games, launch games. And but anyway, after Stardust, and actually they kept creating Stardust versions for up until the PS4. There was the Super Stardust Ultra something. Basically a lot of the same mechanics, but still on newer hardware. They did other shooters, but then they concluded sort of that timeline with Nex Machina, which is a twin stick shooter game type of thing, where you just the objective is to kill everything. And it was designed in cooperation with Eugene Jarvis, who is a legendary designer of pinball machines and also of video arcade games like Defender and Smash TV and so on. So they worked together with him to create Project Jarvis, which then turned into Nex Machina. Unfortunately, this game didn't really sell that well. I think it fell sort of short of expectations because the trend was leaning towards other games at that time. But I'm happy that Housemarque were able to pick themselves up and focus on something else. But I'm also very happy that they managed to produce Nex Machina, because it's a very beautiful, majestic game. And I'll show you. This is the boss. So sorry if I'm spoiling the game for someone, but
you
this
can't
is the,
avoid spoilers these
yeah,
days.
but this is the final boss. But I can tell you for a fact I would have never seen this myself, so I just stole someone's gameplay. But a lot of the things that were present in Stardust, they're also present here. The visuals are, there's a similarity to them, and also you will see in a moment how it's pushing the system to the absolute limits, and not only the system, also the player, because we are going to see some bullets.
Yeah.
Yay!
And
Going right
it just
there.
gets crazier from here. So this is like a tour de force of what the PS4 was capable of, and what the team was capable of.
And you can see that in Returnal as well.
Yeah.
The same kind of influence of the aesthetics.
Yeah, that's happened. That's very like Housemarque as well. And so yeah, it's fascinating how the demo scene has sort of penetrated the game design. But I'm also interested, like, to see in the future, because now new people are coming in the game development scene, and many of them have no connection with the demo scene, and it's in no way required to operate in the game industry. The boss level people in a lot of Finnish companies, they still have their roots there.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting to see, because the new people come in with new ideas, and how it gets blended in with this heritage, and what we will see out of it. But I, like, personally, because I love hardware, I love computers, I love different systems, and I love seeing them being pushed to the limit.
To the limits.
And that's not something that you can necessarily do in, like, Unreal Engine. You have to have your own thing. Like, as a sort of an anecdote, Bugbear, who also was recently sold to THQ Nordic, they are a developer of racing games, and they're also very deeply rooted in the demo scene.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
where I remember also all the
Yeah.
other versions of
yeah,
the car game.
yeah. So, and they created Rally Trophy and Flat Out, and most recently Wreckfest. And they didn't have a proper PS2 dev kit when they were porting Flat Out, so they wrote their own tools based on, like, very broken Japanese documentation, because it was not available in English. And so they did that. They had their own system that could build the things. And I remember being told that when Microsoft they wanted to do backwards compatibility from the Xbox 360 to the original Xbox, and they had the Xbox version of Flat Out, the racing game, and they were looking at the code, and basically they called Bugbear to ask, okay, you did what? Because they had written their own routines that were quite efficient, but they were non-trivial to port over to the backwards compatibility program, because it was so low-level stuff.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of stuff that I love to see, and it's also beneficial, because if we only start relying on the very high-level DEs, then we lose a bit of the magic that was in the demo scene.
Right.
There is no right or wrong way to write games, of course, but it's good to bear in mind that if you can also just sometimes bang the hardware a bit and see what happens.
Yeah.
Because that was also notorious with the demo scene, that the products were, like, very incompatible. There are some Amiga demos that you cannot run on most Amigas, because they rely on stuff being in the place where it was on the developer systems and nowhere else.
I love it how in the game jam scene you can see also these very low code or no code tools that some have interpreted in a very different way. So for instance, a very, very kind of a small tool called Bitsy. You can see a couple of example games where it's a tool where you can create this kind of a square space, formed like adventure games where you go from one room to another and talk to someone. But then there is one specific game that the character is what is it called? A teardrop. and you go from a phase, like you kind of move it in a phase. So it's not a room anymore. There's a phase where you move it. So it's like kind of you're crying in the game. So there is this kind of a interesting creative practice of also these very limited tools that are not like tech limitations that you're exploring, but the limitations of the kind of a tiny game development tools, and it has a little bit of this taste as well.
And it's also important to understand about the demo scene why people are writing new demos for the Amiga 500 or the C64 or the VIC-20 instead of using the latest and greatest. It's because they want to find the common denominator. They want to find a platform, because it's very easy to say what looks cool on the Amiga 500 when you know the system, that you know, okay, this it's capable of more or less this. But whereas when you're writing for a new computer, it's much more difficult to make an impression, because then you're competing with the commercial studios and whatever they can throw at infinite like person work hours and so on. So that's why it's the demo scene is so fascinating, and also with size coding, because that's another way to limit yourself. Okay, if you have to do it in 4K, there's only so much you can do, whereas with unlimited file size, it becomes a different ball game. But it's very much and also a very direct development of the bedroom programmer thing. So yeah,
there's tons of creativity there. So if you ever question that programming is not creative art, you should check these.
Yeah, and also it should be noted that the demo scene is now in the UNESCO World
Cultural Heritage.
Yeah. It's part of that. It's been chosen in Finland and Germany, and they're aiming to have it like for catalog for the entire world as well. But yeah, so
I've noticed that in our chat there is also one kind of a Games Now veteran. So Game Art Jaakko Ko. I think that it's our original artist, Jaakko Kemppainen, and he's there now. Also, if somebody was a latecomer and doesn't understand what a demo is, he's there commenting on that. And I think that Jaakko's kind of reading of demos in the Assembly Festival really brought me into the culture, kind of explaining some of the things that you see in the screen, that they have a specific nature. For instance, those scroller texts, and also there's like a tradition to say kudos to other demo sceners. You can see like hashtags, or no, not the hashtags, but like tags of the nicks of the other artists, and that's
because in the demo scene you have handles like you do on Twitch and so on. So it's always
has been there forever. Yeah, I think we need to move on.
Yeah, we need to, and now for something completely different.
Yes, that's me, says Jaakko.
So change of tone. What is another quintessentially Finnish thing? Well, it's Suomi Finland perkele. So it's how is the Finnish culture standing out? What do they want to bring to the international audience? And I think this is also a fairly common factor in a lot of games. So I thought it would be another nice thing to explain.
Also, perkele is a word that you should not say to your grandma. So just
nope.
Yeah,
but it's nowadays kind of, I guess.
It's not that bad.
Not that bad anymore.
Yeah,
it's a curse word.
It means the devil.
It means the devil.
That's what it does.
It's a bad word, so I would say.
It's almost like it's more like a Beelzebub or something, like the one formation of the devil.
Yeah, well, more or less, but it's him that it refers to. Anyway.
Right. Yeah, perkele itself.
Yeah. So just a bit of background for the international audience, especially. So Finland has an odd geographical position, because we are next to a great country that used to be the Soviet Union and is now Russia. And it is very much its own sphere of cultural influence. And it had a very large effect on Eastern Europe and of course the rest of the world. But we were always standing there at the threshold, so to speak. And this is something that our politicians had to very, very carefully maneuver around until at least, until the collapse of the Soviet Union, basically. And nowadays have to as well.
Yeah.
Our president was just there in Moscow talking with Mr. Putin. And it influenced us a lot. So we were in the Western sphere of influence, but we were sort of like the outliers. Also within the Nordic countries, we love our Nordic neighbors, the Swedes and the Danes and the Norwegians, but they never really understood our plight in that we were a different people. Like we were culturally separated from them. We were part of Russia for a long time, and then our ethnicity is a bit different. Our language is a bit different, and that put us in another group, so to speak, and. A lot of things influence that, and there's been a lot written about that. But anyway, it's important to understand that Finland was different in the Nordic countries for a very long time, and there are a myriad reasons for this: politics, culture, and so on. That made us like wary of our own culture, and it also gave our culture this specific flavor. And it has to be pointed out that Finns generally understand and can write English fairly well, and a part of that is attributable to the decision that our TV programs will not be dubbed, i.e. they will not be voiced over by other actors, which is the norm in countries like Germany, Italy, and so on, where they were actually the voice actors for people like Schwarzenegger. They were always the same, and they became stars in their own in their own right. But we never had that. We had subtitles. And I, for one, I learned most of my English watching Knight Rider.
And you're now professional in English.
Yeah, I earn my living speaking and writing English. And the thing was that you could follow the subtitles like very well. They corresponded at that time very well to what was being spoken, because the subtitles were very, very professional at that time, very proud of their work. Unfortunately, that slightly changed because they can no longer pay these people good money. So now it's being done like some companies. The Finnish broadcasting company, they keep doing excellent work. Not so for some of the others, unfortunately. It's like you get what you pay for. It's very much a question of that. And if you're not willing to pay, then you don't get the quality. But anyway, our understanding and our writing of English is fine. But going back to our culture, and also probably some of the teaching methods that were used, speaking English was not a strong point. We were not encouraged to speak necessarily. It is not in our culture to be very sort of extrovert and to outgoing and to socialize with strangers. That's also changing, luckily. Nowadays,
now that we just kind of learned to hug.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic.
Yeah, that was taken away.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I remember that there was a barrier to speaking English, and we wanted to be absolutely right. We didn't want to make any mistakes. We wanted to ensure that this gets done. Like, people have called us the Nordic Germans. I think that's accurate, because there's very much, and I'm hearing that some of our genes also they've arrived from Germany, so
it's genetic to be so organized and precise.
Yeah, it's a bit genetic as well. I don't want to like put too much emphasis on this, but anyway, there's something to it.
Yeah.
Luckily, we had
couch genetics.
Yeah, we had these ambassadors, international ambassadors, fortunately, who were the rally drivers.
Oh no.
So we had people like Tommi Mäkinen, Juha Kankkunen, Ari Vatanen, and so on, from the early 50s and 60s onwards, up until the present day. The rally drivers and also the Formula One, like Mika Häkkinen, Keke Roosberg, Jyrki Järvilehto, and so on. They've been presenting Finland internationally, and they don't care what they sound like. And it gave rise to this rally English thing. Rally English is where you speak the correct words, but you don't pronounce them at all.
Yeah.
You just speak English like you would.
You would speak Finnish.
Read the words and say.
It's very difficult to go back to that.
Yes,
when you didn't learn the English, it's just like that's how you would speak English, the way that it's the way that it's written. But now that you've learned it, it's like super difficult.
Yeah, you have to completely switch your brain to another mode. But there's a good video on YouTube where it's I think the title is Rally English Explained, and it's worth watching.
Check that out.
But anyway, so that became a thing, and I think it was laughed at, of course, and the memes would sort of be passed around, and people would make fun of that. But in a way, the guys were right, because people wanted to listen to them. They had something to say, so they would, and they didn't care that their pronunciation was off.
Yeah.
So they just did that. They communicated, and I would attribute some of that to the fact that we sort of in the 90s, especially as a nation, we got on our feet and we started to reach out internationally. We joined the European Union, and we started looking more and more towards the West, and also like bringing in what we have in our own culture. And that was also visible in the games in some ways, in more ways than I'm going to present here. But in any way, like I said, during the 1990s, a number of the indie developers in particular started using the local themes and local names in their production. And we just saw the Princess Voilevi in Stardust, which was an international release.
Voilevi.
So Finnish words.
Yeah, because we understood that might also sound exotic to someone. Because we went from thinking, okay, it's automatically stupid if it's something in Finnish, to, okay, well, someone might find this funny. Yeah. So we get games like Tapan kaikki.
When it is in Finnish, it sounds really brutal.
Yeah.
So Tapan
Tapan
kaikki
kaikki
means I'm gonna kill everybody.
Yeah.
Ai, ai, ai.
Or everything even.
Yeah. And this is like a representative of a typical type of indie game from the 90s in a lot of respects as well, because it's sort of ultra violent, where you go around, well, and you kill people.
Oh.
That is what you do, because you tapat kaikki. And so yeah.
Oh, there is the shadow also.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because
cool.
it like casts where you can
right.
see. I thought that was an interesting mechanic as well.
Yeah.
Right.
So it gives you a field of view, and if the guys are not in your field of view, you can't see them. So that was the first mission. So and also very, very demo scene with the.
Again.
So you would say this is Suomi Finland perkele.
This is part of it. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you get that. You get that. We're going to go much deeper. But also we were talking about the rally thing. This I find fascinating. Rally Sport, also from 1996, also on MS-DOS, by Jukka Jäkälä. I understand that he was volunteering for the rally scene. He was doing something, I think it was timekeeping or whatnot. And he wrote this rally game, and it's quite different from anything else for the perspective alone, because you'll see, well, first of all, it's mostly in English, but for example, the track names, Nurtsi cruising, Nurtsi is grass, and then you have vesistö vedätys, which is like water
I can
track.
see where the one recent game is. Are you going to mention it pretty soon? I guess.
So yeah, this is
These words.
So yeah, this is I thought it was an interesting, like from a design point of view as well, because like I've seen isometric games from a 3/4 perspective, but I haven't seen this again. And it looks like when you're watching it on a video, it looks almost unplayable, but it isn't. It's very nice, and the car physics, they work like surprisingly well. This is a fun game to play together with a friend or even alone, and it like focuses on these rear-wheel drive, old-style racing thing. And this is also like when I was talking about the rally drivers, this is an old tradition in Finland to race the bangers. There was the everyman's class where anyone, and also actually flat out the game. It started off as a simulation of that class where you, I would think it was 5,000 marks, which was the old Finnish currency. It was the maximum amount you could put in your car, because after the race, if someone wanted to buy your car for the set sum, you had to sell it.
Oh,
So that was like, it was done to prevent people from like building unbeatable cars, because you would have to sell it after the race if someone wanted to buy it. So this was the tradition, and it gave rise to the rally drivers, also the Formula One drivers, and so on. So there's this long racing tradition, and I wanted to show that through rally sport. And
So that is like combined. So I have rally English and Finnish words here, but
Yeah.
we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah.
So I think we need to move on so that we also get
Yeah.
the wonderful world of South Korean history that
we do.
Solip will be sharing.
Let's see what we have here. Yeah.
Yes,
And a third game,
Liero.
Liero, which means more or less worm. Metsän eläimet is the publisher. Forest animals, which was just something that they thought up, but it sounded cool. So this is a two-player game, like a more brutal worms thing. This is also playable in the Finnish Museum of Games. You can just see the basic gameplay. So very simple sort of pixel graphics thing, and they're trying to get at each other using these different forms of weapons. Yeah, and Liero was a name that inspired Noita. Because the people behind Noita, it was originally called Wizard Physics, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So they started thinking of another name, and they thought, okay, well, Liero was a Finnish word, and that game did fine. Everyone knew what Liero was. So why couldn't we call it Noita?
Yeah.
And that was the thought process, and I think that's also
Yeah.
along the lines
Right.
of what I was just saying. That
It's also 5 letters.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and there are some similarities between the games as well, because you're influencing the environment. There's this sort of thing as well. But yeah, a lot of these games. There's also a clone of Artillery Duel. There's this game where you have two tanks and they fire shots at each other, where you have to enter the angle and the power and so on. And it's called Tulli, which is the name of a bird. And it makes no sense.
Yes.
But it was.
It's also the thing on the fabric on the. Well, anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, the author just picked it because, well, it sounded funny.
Yeah.
and that was an older game. I think it was the late 80s or something like that. But yeah.
So this tradition of the Finnish words in games still lives on. So as Mikko said, Noita, the game about wizardry.
Wizard physics.
Yeah.
Is named with Finnish words, but also their enemies are named in Finnish.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons for that was that when they started to think about, all the localization work that you have to do for the names, it's easier if they are all just part of the lore in Finnish.
True.
So it's kind of nice. There's pakkasukko and things like that there. Yeah.
And now we reach the culmination of this line of
Finnish,
investigation.
The perkele thing.
Yes. Maximum perkele. Yeah, because this game
Maximum
this game is like this is peak perkele right here.
Oi.
My summer car. This is a pastiche simulation of life in Finland in the Finnish countryside in 1995. So it started off as a simulator for building your car, but it developed into a simulation of living life in Finland in 1995, and it's absolutely magnificently brilliant.
During the winter? Or?
No, this is during the summer, but I think there's
It's summer
'cause
car,
it's
yeah.
my summer car.
Right.
I think he was teasing my winter car at some point. We'll
yeah.
see. Because there's also a tradition, like you need to buy a rear-wheel drive car for the winter so you can do slides. Yeah. But yeah, so you have the corner shops where you buy stuff, and maybe I'll fast forward. This is a longer video from a YouTuber whose voice I've now muted. But anyway, so you play the slot machines, and then you drive this tanker truck thing.
Life simulation.
Oh yeah, very much so. And
so the kind of simple life simulation and the kind of embodiment of the Finnish culture of the countryside.
Yeah, and of course, of course, it's a parody. But like the best form of parody is where you have some part of truth in it. Yeah, because this is
all
the
of
thing.
a sudden it became fancy.
Yeah.
Oi,
So
going to the
this is
forest.
so this is the summer car, the Satsuma, which is a Datsun really, a Nissan, and so he's getting the beer.
Of course, stacks of beer in the
illegal,
car.
but still.
Yeah, that's very.
Stacks of beer in the car. That's so Finland.
So the thing, and all of us that so I lived, I grew up in a small city, so or village. It's not a city at all. Actually, in the same village than Jaakko, our original artist, but. We all kind of know someone that was tuning their own cars because there's like the vocational school track for car building, and then they had their own cars and they had dice, the hairy dice in the
Yes,
in
you
the
had the
car.
leopard print on the steering wheel.
Leopard prints and
yeah.
things like that. So it's like a pimp
Yeah.
my car before the MTV did that.
Yeah.
So we all share that. It's absolutely everywhere in every village in
And that's
Finland.
a very typical Finnish
And then
forests, road,
Yeah.
Then you can
flatland,
probably,
no
I'm not sure, I haven't
mountain.
played my summer car, but you can probably have pilluralli, which is like also absolutely a horrible word.
Yeah.
I would not use that, advise you not to use that word. But it still exists, and if you would say that in a conversation for anybody who has lived in a small village, it's the driving your car around the small village center.
Yeah.
Around and around and around. Well, I can go with the
purpose
etymology
is to
with
attract the opposite sex. Yeah.
yeah.
But it's now actually illegal by law because.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because it's so wasteful.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is not good
No.
Yeah.
in any
No.
way.
Yeah.
It's not
but
good.
it's just like it's
Cool.
cruising, but with
Yeah.
a Finnish.
but
touch.
to kind of give credit for my age group in a small village when it's like
Yeah, there was
minus
nothing else to do.
25,
Yeah, there was
nothing you
nothing
can
else to
do.
do.
There's no
25
way you can
degrees
meet other
Yeah.
people, so you have to drive your car around the village center. I
Yeah.
hope that
Oh.
they'll find something for the youth now.
Yeah.
Computer games? I don't know.
Yeah.
See, that's
Yeah.
wow.
All right, so
Yeah,
is
so-
that it?
Yeah, that's the two lines of thought that I wanted to give you. I thought it would be interesting to show you something else from
Yeah.
the
Life
history.
simulation.
So,
Yeah.
Summertime in Finland.
We're going to discuss about these after Solip's presentation, but I'm really kind of, let's see what kind of games can be done with these. I will be kind of adding something that is, okay, political correctness is important these days. So there are so many directions that this could go, and we're not going there with our code of conduct. But it does exist heavily in the culture of the Finnish games. There's a lot of improper stuff. Also in the museum we have super culturally appropriate game to be presented so that we don't hide that history.
Yeah, and we
Um,
have damage, the sadistic butchering of humanity.
Yes.
I was thinking of bringing that out, but I thought,
Yeah.
okay,
Oh.
maybe I
Yeah,
probably
too
not.
many.
yeah.
But it's like it's an adolescence culture that then born into growing into the more mature and more kind of mainstream. But it used to be like just fun jokes that the
Yeah.
young boys oftentimes had. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna discuss about that more, and let's see how. Like I'm completely newbie for the South Korean game design tradition, so we'll see. Solip obviously has been sharing some of the things. Like super surprising to me that The Sims wasn't the thing.
Oh, yeah, that's on. Yeah,
Yeah,
it wasn't
that's what
the-
I know.
It was never the thing when I was young. I'm
Yeah.
sorry for all the Sims fans over there in Korea, but it wasn't my thing back in the
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
All right, so
Okay.
just take a stage.
Yeah. Hey. Okay. So I'm Solip. As you probably guys already know, I'm a doctoral student, also a teaching assistant here in games now, and I'm also a comic artist. I do studies about game developers, more specifically expats, immigrant game developers here in Finland. And you can check my comic, just the promotions. So I used to work in video game companies in Korea and also a bit in the US. I was working at a company called Nexon, and they have Nexon Computer Museum in Jeju Island. So if you look at the map of South Korea, there's like an island in the very south. That's where the museum is. And I was one of the staff member working there. It was great to see all those historical games coming from Korea, and also that was a lot of influential games that I really wanted to discuss there. And now I'm in Finland. I'm also working collaboratively with the Embassy of Korea here in Finland, coordinating game exhibitions or esports events, for example, Corfin Esports Festival and Corfin Special Game Week, both which just involve bringing Korean and Finnish players or gamers, game developers together to play games or showcase their game, etc. So I've been quite active on that, and I'm also active member in Finnish Game Jam. So yeah, I'm here to introduce about Korean games, and then I also just have to let you know it's been roughly 2 years since I haven't been to Korea yet because of
that's
COVID.
awful.
So I need to catch up. So if there's Korean viewers right here and they will be like, "That's not up to date information," I'm sorry, I have to visit Korea.
But it's been a special time, so it's like
I really miss the food.
oh,
Right. So we have this kind of online stereotype about Korean gamers, and I know that like the world think there's so many Korean gamers that are good in games. This is Faker, by the way, in League of Legends scene. He's Korean. He's one of the most famous esport players all in history, and yeah, and that's kind of like the stereotype image of South Korean gamers, that they are good at games, and we also think that we're also good at games. We're like national pride game as sports.
You
And
are good at games, yes.
and Blizzard game has been long been traditionally quite famous there. We also have very strong game industry of our own. How we actually play game is very competitive, I would say. Like, people are very, very into analyzing the game system, trying to figure out the most effective way, how to win, how to mastermind the games. So I will get that to that a little bit later also again as well. And then what was we about Korean games? So as Korean living in Europe, I would say Korean games are not that well known in this part of the earth.
Yeah.
And Korean games are, to be frankly speaking, they're very domestic heavy, and many of their revenues come from China, Southeast Asia, or South Korea internally. So in Europe, there's not many Korean games you can look at, except like, there's some stereotype image that Korean games would be kind of very cute or anime style, probably. Or there was PUBG, which was quite famous here in Europe, but then still, like, people doesn't have a full grasp of what Korean games are. Obviously, the Korean game industry is famous for free-to-play monetization business model, because that's where it kind of started out and became big. I would also say that Korean games are very content heavy. You have lots of things to do in there. There's a lot of online games from Korea that literally gives you homework. That like, you access the game at a certain time, you do this instant dungeons, you do this and this, and there's a lot of contents to build up. And I will also talk about this, why this is kind of a thing in this side of the world. So just a number, 70% of people in Korea play games. That's coming from statistic-wise. But this only refers to digital game. If I had to translate in English, I will get back again to why we call this game, but only digital game. It's dominantly mobile, 91%, PC, 59%. Just as a reference, population-wise, Korea is 10 times more populated country than Finland. So obviously, game developers, there are way more developers. So I checked the statistic. There's roughly 3,000 game developers in Finland, whereas it is roughly 85,000 over there in Korea. That's from 2018. And yeah, so we also have Game Developers Union, which is also quite interesting. You can consider. Not many countries have that, so that's quite also important thing.
That's a massive amount of developers. If you compare, for instance, the Finnish numbers with Australian game developers, it's almost the same, even though the nation is super much bigger.
Right.
So like, you can see that South Korea is a very game-oriented country.
Right, and also the game companies there that operates are very big scale. So in Finland, a lot of the game companies are roughly around 10 people, 20 people. Even Rovio, Supercell, that are famous, they don't go more than 400. Whereas in Nexon, the company that I used to work, they had like thousands of employees, and offices. They have a huge building, for example. So the scale-wise is quite slightly different in that perspective. Just to give rough sketch of timeline of Korean game history. So Korea started off basically the hackers cultures. The very first computer arcade machine is historically, there's a record that it arrived first time ever in Korea in 1970. So it was Pong arcade machine, and there's a newspaper around like mid-1970s advertising about that. So that's the first record of digital game arrived in Korea. And then it all kind of snowballed, affected all the way to IBM clones. So MSX type IBM clone computers and Apple II series were pretty much dominant around 1980s. Korea also had their own console at some point, but it was also MSX base, so it ran in MS-DOS, so Gemix, 1958. and all kind of it built upon. So it kind of people start to get their machine, like fix it, hacking it, opening up and creating their own games. And the rise of Korean PC game erupted in late 80s with the Dream Traveler in 1987, which is actually made by the high school schooler.
So we have
So
a lot
there-
of similarities with the Finnish and the
Yeah.
South Korean timelines.
Yeah, and then at that time, a lot of these hacked games or like indie games, so to say, that like games that are built by hacked devices, were also sold in specific district, like Cheonggyecheon district in Seoul or Yongsan Electronic District, which still exists today. So the shops would be open, and then the hackers would sell the floppy disk or CDs, the games that they made right there, or purchase some other software that they made, like trading off right in there. And then the Dream Traveler was basically sold like that. So
So wait a minute, like sold where? In the store?
so
or
in Electronic District, there were many of them. They each have little shops, and
Yes.
each shop owner is kind of like the trader.
Oh, right,
So you basically go there, and then floppy disk. You give one floppy disk,
Yeah.
and then they will copy it in 100 copies and then sell it off.
All right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can kind of see where this gonna go. It's a copyright issues. Like developers never actually get monetized well.
Yeah.
They never actually get compensated. So many copies and coming up. It built up a very nice community of early
Sharing.
developers sharing, but then it didn't actually went off for becoming a business. And that's where the rise and fall of Korean PC games, there was like a huge crash that PC game companies weren't able to profit enough.
Yeah.
And there was the IMF economy crisis happen in 1997, which drastically pivot the industry situation. And that's where all the games that pretty much almost every South Korean games at that time shifted to online games. Because
Right.
online games, you have to access to online. You cannot copy it. You enjoyed it in multiplayer. That's the important part of it. So and then that legacy still exists today. The MMO is huge, and mobile games are also becoming huge, but that also multiplayer is very dominant over there. And then, like during this MMO games rises, South Korea also invented, esports as a business. That year 2000, that's when the esport was first broadcast in TV in Korea, and then free to play was invented in 2001, 2002. There's a different type of historical records of it, but that's kind of how like overall history of Korean games emerged. And then recently, this very heavily monetization free-to-play models are also being questioned by the players there. So there has been some truck protesters. So basically, players pay the truck with the gigantic LED screen and then send it in front of the company, demanding for some request. Because of COVID, they cannot protest on street. They cannot gather. So this is what is going on in the past 1
Is
or
it
2
still
years.
going on there?
Yeah, it's like it kind of became like a major trend keyword in 2021. So yeah, and then just to record, all of my games experience that I played is during the MMO games time. So a lot of the games are in MMOs. I will share that with you later on. So yeah, I guess I have to quickly move on because of the time limits. First of all, I just want to imply that the word game doesn't actually exist in Korean language. So the word game referred to here in European context and what is referred to in Korea could be very different. So I want to aware you guys on that, especially that's going to impact your jammers who wants to communicate with the East Asian jammers out there over there in Korea. So we have loanword for game. We could just call it game. Game. And then it's kind of we have a word, our own vocabulary of play, 놀이, and then there's a word game, which is the loan word. And there's a little bit of difference within that. So 놀이 is a joyful activity, it's not working, it's something original, old. There's always the win or lose status. It could be role playing. Cost of loss is pretty much low in 놀이. So, and then most of all, players can alter the rules. That's kind of like the general assumptions of 놀이. It's like traditional, it's a bit old, it's usually for kids, and players can alter the rule. You can also pick someone to become 깍두기, which is kind of the person who's omitted from the rule. So he or she can join this atmosphere, this joyful atmosphere together without worrying about rules. So
nice.
like for newbies,
Like a free rider.
Yeah. And then usually we assign this 깍두기 to person who's new to this rules, new to this community, new person in classroom, for example.
Okay.
So that's a very important functions of 놀이 in play in Korea, whereas in game is something Western, something digital, came from the modern. So usually when Koreans say game, it means digital game. Usually, we also mentioned in the previous statistic where 70% of Korean play games, but in reality, if you look closely into statistics survey list, they usually refers only digital game.
Yeah.
And except unless you specifically say it's a board game. And we also don't have the word for board game, we just say board game.
Yeah.
Right? It has more structured rule. It also has wins and loss status, just like Nori. But the major difference is that you don't have 깍두기 there. You have game master. It's controlled. The players cannot alter the rule because it's mastered by game or computer system. That unless you hack the game, you cannot alter the rule, right? So it's a little bit more competitive, and you have to play by the rule set. And again, this is generally referred to digital games. So when Koreans say it's game, it's usually digital games, unless.
So I think that your numbers for digital game players is higher than Finland, like in terms of the percentage if we compare to the player parameter.
But then also statistical loophole is that there's no statistic about nori or amusement orak is also another term that a lot of people use. So the terminology is a little bit flicking here. So depending on where you look at.
Yeah. Also in Finland we have differences. We do have the word for game. But I think that when we speak about games, pelit, nowadays a lot of people still talk about digital games. So they wouldn't, for instance, think about sports or think about like anything like yard games or something like that when we talk about it.
Yeah.
Even though they do belong in there.
When I first came to like Western world, when I first studied in the US and now here in Europe, when people start saying a game that is not digital, it always confused me. How does that even work? I mean, game has to be digital. And so, of course, like people would ask, I mean, you guys have Go, you have board games, traditional ones from China, from East Asia. Why don't you call that as a game? Well, we call them as play. That's the thing. We call them as play boards, 놀이판, where like the play is performed on the plate. And of course, now Go is being called a board game. But it's a little bit more adopted new terms that it's now used being today. So it's a little bit flickery, and then so.
But you can't have a free rider in Go.
Well, you can alter the rules. So if you have there's many different type of sub plays and Go, and you can just made up the new rules.
Right.
And then you can negotiate. Whereas in for example, Diablo is like you have to defeat the Diablo.
Right.
The system is right there. So that's kind of nuance that applies a little bit different between the word play, 놀이 in Korean, and game in Korean. So when I encountered Dungeon and Dragon, LARP in Europe, I was like stunned. Like, what is this? You play games that on what? So that was very new me back in 10 years ago when I first learned that there's a cultural nuance of game, and therefore people who develops game also understands games differently. And then again, I also have to mention, it's again, comes in Squid Game reference. So we have Squid Play, 오징어 놀이, and there's a TV show called Squid Game. So this again differentiates play and game nuance. Whereas in play, you can alter the rule; it's way more casual. Whereas in game, it becomes more strict and competitive. There's rule that is controlled by the master. Of course, there's casual, play-ish game like Minecraft or Roblox that you can play around. But it's in general, the nuance-wise, there's a difference between Squid Play and Squid Game, I would say. So I think like the reason why TV show is called game, even in Korean, but not nori, although the original play was their nori, is probably they kind of play around with this nuance.
And also that it's international. People wouldn't think it in the same way with the word play, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
But it's super interesting. I've watched only a couple of episodes of the Squid Game, but it definitely draws from the children games.
Right. So in
like
children's play, we usually say children's play
right.
in the game. So yeah, when I try to talk with some of my friends and even my parents saying like, hey, you know, mom, there's games that you don't play on computer, and my parents would be like, is that possible? Right? Because the power of word is very strong, and there's kind of where it comes from. You know, the game word itself is kind of like digital competition. You compete together.
Right.
So you compete as the team versus other team, and you bond. So there are a lot of Korean games, of course, they have community features, ranking system, auction, trades, guild, and raid system, because it makes you feel like this is the game world. You compete together. It follows that demand. And character customization is also important, also because of that you want to stand out in the competition. You want to stand out that, and also I often visual customize my character according to my friend, according to my guild, to feel the bondness in this virtual world. And that's also something, you know, think about compete together. And that's why we have PC Bang, the so-called internet cafe, where you go with your friend, you log into the game together, and then you raid together, play games together. It's pretty much like a LAN party, but there's a dedicated party room that you pay, and it's very cheap, about less than €5 per hour for sure. You can order food and beverages. You can't smoke, but yeah, it's kind of like a thing. And this PC Bang culture is very strong in Korea as well.
How is the pandemic doing for that, I guess?
It's been very difficult for the industry in PC Bangs, And then because it's also digital competition, it becomes kind of like a us versus the system competition also comes in, especially the hardcore gamers. Well, if you cannot alter the rules, then I might as well defeat the system. So joy of defeating, conquering the system, like consuming the in-game contest as quick as possible, or exploit some system, like dominating the system. That's also very visible, especially in the hardcore gamers in Korea. And one of the well-known stories that, you know, Diablo 3 from Blizzard was released in 2012, and the developers there was like, this is gonna take like at least few days, few weeks to finish. But then South Korean gamers defeated even before the Earth turned one cycle. So the game was first released in Korea, and by the time it reached the US,
it was already beaten.
Yeah, it was already defeated by South Korean gamers. And there was also like bunch of like comments on Reddit and Reddit, like American Blizzard fan is like, why Koreans don't enjoy like slowly, you know, feel the game. But you know, for us, dominating, conquering the system, like overcoming the system is very important, joyful in the experience.
Sounds like stressful culture to me.
Well, that's the beauty of it, you know. So that's why
it sounds like an easy game jam game though. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So if you're a game developer in Korea, obviously you will encounter this like content consuming heavy players. That's why a lot of Korean games, especially online, they have constant updates, constant event, introducing new characters, introducing new levels, for example. That is considered very important to keep your players, keep your customers be live in your games. And that is quite important. And of course, like live operation these days, that's very important to constantly live operate, updates the game contents in there. But in Korea, that's very fast. And that's why maybe also the number of game developers in Korea are a bit higher, because you need a lot of production cycles, a fast one over there. So that was the cultural nuance of game, the power of language. So consider coming from there. Well, of course, if you want to check out some more statistic, Neo Games in Finland offers very good analysis about South Korean games in numbers. Whereas I discussed about this power of language, of how the games are perceived. Well, like what does it mean fun in those contexts? So I'll briefly introduce 5 games from Korea, very biased selections of mine, and
Yeah,
some
no
design
bias, but like a very good subjective thoughts, like
Curated, not biased.
Curated,
Yes,
thank
that's
you,
thank you, Mikko. That's the correct word.
So curated by me.
Mm-hmm.
And first I want to emphasize that the game, especially for those jammers, the game mechanics, game design doesn't have to be standout or completely new. There is no new game.
Everything is combined.
Everything is combined. Art is also emerged from copying others and adding more others, and consider that. And that's where a lot of Korean games were also emerged. I mentioned about the hackers cultures in the 80s, and even during the early times of Korean online games, there were a lot of games that you would see from other world, but then localized in Korean context and added more values to match the needs from Korean gamers. So first, one of my favorite game that I spent tons of my times with is Crazy Racing Kart Ride. Sorry, I had never named this game
Crazy
in
racing kart
English. So Katraido, that's how we call it. And then Katraido is also too long, so Kat, yeah. So we abbreviated a lot. So if you look at the game, you will soon figure out, oh, it looks like very typical racing game. A multiplayer Mario Kart will be the best example. They also have item combat mode as well. It's very simple mechanics. You instantly know what is going on. You have to win. You have to win against other players. So basically, no tutorials required, no language required. It can go very global. And this game is also one of the games that was very famous in China as well. It was a very low entry level. What they did is that Korean players, like I mentioned, is like very important about community features. Play together, and then customizations is also the thing. And together with PC Bang and together with Esport Rising, there were lots of things to do together with your friend with this game. You watch the match together, you enjoy the match together. And for myself, to be honest, I went to the game and then just never plays the game but just chat around with my friends. I basically use this game as a messenger as well. And there were a lot of like customization that you can add on to it. So it was very popular and still does. They also have comic books, animations, nice dolls that you can buy, which I still have it at my home. So yeah, it's a very low entry bar, and the game mechanic itself might be very simple enough. You know what's going on, but at the same time, you understood what players feels fun coming from their cultural context. So that was quite important. The success of this game. And then another game is, I'm pretty sure all South Korean viewers watching this video is like, this game again. It's Anypong from 2009, and it's a very typical match puzzle games. And it has a lot of events, a lot of items, which is what appeal to Korean gamers over there. So again, low entry. The mechanic itself is not something new. But then the game was easy to sign up with the messenger that was it is still widely used among Korean. It's called Kakao Talk. It's like WhatsApp here in US. So Kakao Talk, every Koreans use Kakao Talk, and this game was allowed to play for sign up with Kakao Talk.
Yeah.
And then the game will constantly ping you like, hey, your friend just won more earned points than you do, so play the game again. And then it kind of gives you this community feeling again, and then competition comes in that you enjoy, like winning and loss together with your friends. And it is quite hectic also. And then to be honest, this video, it's probably filmed one of these YouTubers very recently. There's a lot of items and icons that I cannot recognize, meaning that the game built up the new contents for the past few years, a constant updates and adding new ones so to keep people busy. But yeah, also this game erupted some copyright, and also this came also a beginning of discussion about the game addiction as well, because this game was heavily constantly ping you that you have to play the game, and therefore many of them were criticizing this game that maybe it's too addictive.
So the basic mechanic is like one way you switch the characters around.
Yeah,
So it's quite a bit like Zookeeper, isn't it?
Zookeeper, if I know that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It
It's
has
a
the
match
phases
3.
as well.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a match 3 puzzle game, but very speed. But then this user is using a lot of different items, like bomb items, so which it looks very hectic. And this is one of the games that sparked the mobile game industry in Korea as well. But at the same time, had the downside that it draw the popular like politicians, policymakers' attention that maybe the games are too addictive nowadays. Maybe we have to regulate. So that was sparkle the discourse as well. But again, this game also shows that the mechanic can be very similar, but by adding, localizing some bit of what you think that is fun, what the target market or target players thinks that would be fun. Knowing the culture, knowing this context actually makes a lot of difference in terms of games.
Is kawaii type of thing like super big in also Korea? It's so close to
like
Japan.
cute.
Yeah.
Cute. Yeah. Although game history-wise or industry-wise, Korea and Japan are pretty much separate.
Yeah.
Because they're like second half of 20th century, there was no cultural exchange between these two countries. We were in a Cold War, political dispute, and still goes along today. So there was no Japanese console or anime that was officially came or imported to Korea.
Yeah.
But then it was enjoyed, smuggled.
Yeah.
And then, so we also kind of share this. Not as much as Japan, I would say. Like, we don't have municipality character that looks like anime. That's over the top.
That is so Japanese. Yes, you're right.
Like, we don't.
But for instance, Kakao Talk is very character heavy. It's very merchandise heavy. There's a Kakao Friends shop in Korea. It's like very emoji things. Before we had stickers in other like Western chat thingies. That was huge.
Exactly.
So it was really interesting. When it's my only time ever been there, but maybe like 5 years ago I went to Seoul and to see Kakao Talk, and then the other one, which is the Line Friends. So they both have their big stores, like several floors.
Gigantic,
a lot of
fluffy animals.
Yeah, a lot of the cute items for people of all ages to buy.
Yep.
And it's a chat messenger.
Yes.
It's a weird thing.
It's important. When I use WhatsApp, I always feel sad that there's not enough emojis and cuteness in there.
Just a note on the console thing. Wasn't it so, however, that Samsung, they were in partnership with Sega? Because you had the Samsung Saturn and the Mega Drive. I don't know what they were called in Korea, but
right. So that was also because they could not officially, like Sony couldn't directly export consoles to Korea. So similar to like how Chinese game industry operates these days, where they have to have on-site local office to import or export through that local office. So Samsung was basically a mediator between Sega and the Korean market. And because of that, usually consoles were very expensive and very difficult to access. So console games was not as big. It didn't ever grow up. Personally, I never own a console. And if I say that to my American friends, they will be like, absurd, but that's the reality. Console was too expensive.
I didn't own a console either.
Yeah, it's like, that's why I'm in Finland. So yeah, another game that I want to mention, this is one of my favorite game. I just wanted to mention that this game has amazing battle system, which just it sparks my competitive desire of like, I want to win this. I want to conquer this monster. It's one of those games that has a very good competitive combat system. But unfortunately, again, this contents heavy kind of backfire, which quite happens frequently in a lot of Korean online game, is that you can't just build more contents every day. There's always a limit, right? So this game, and as well as a lot of games out there, they have a lot of grinding system at some point, trying to keep you busy. So you grind until you progress to a certain level, or instant dungeon, or just same instant dungeons, but a little bit of different HP numbers between the boss characters, and they give different rewards, sure, but then the mechanics in there and the dungeon levels are pretty much the same. And you have to play through that over and over again until the next content is revealed. So this game also fell into that loophole where it became very repetitive in some point. The combat system is so nice, you enjoy it, but after you play it for a while, it becomes quite boring at the same time. So of course, I'm not going to tell jammers to build lots of contents heavy game. That's impossible. I brought this up because we have to scope it down at some point. We can't just appeal every gamers out there. We have to find a way to, not being too much content heavy, but still able to entertain ourselves in this game. And look at this gorgeous combat systems. I love it. I miss this game.
What was the year of it? Like when was it released?
2010.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I also want to emphasize a bit, this is probably, I have 2 more games to show, that me as a Korean gamer, and as well as worked in the game industry and some as other Korean, I kind of want to emphasize that game doesn't always have to be competitive. It is fun. Like, competitive game is fun from my standard, but it doesn't have to be. And for that matter, I kind of want to emphasize that we could emphasize the storytelling, we could emphasize the feeling and the atmosphere the game brings, and something that we can think about during this jam maybe, like go outside the box, go beyond what you think of it as game by learning from each other. For example, there was this PC game from 1996, The World of Genesis, 창세기전 2. Of course, there was the first one. This is a legendary game. This is the game that sparked the Korean game industry, and it was very story heavy, and it was like the feeling atmosphere was very good. Unfortunately, I never got to play this myself. I have to confess, because I couldn't get the CD at the time, and the PC game industry after this collapsed in Korea. And obviously this game wasn't sold as much because many of them were copied. It has a very nice feeling atmosphere. It kind of went over, like, it challenged the hardware capacity of how aesthetically the story can be delivered nicely. And the music there back in those days, it was over the top. The technology that involved in this game was high tech. And many people who played this game told me that they teared, they felt they were in the story, and they want to find this type of feeling and atmosphere come back alive, that, the game that you play slowly and actually feel what's in there. And something that for us to remind about the current competitiveness in Korean games. So something like, maybe we can go back. Maybe we can go to stories and the feeling atmosphere. Yeah, look at this, how gorgeous that is. Yes. And another game that I want to raise up for the last bit is the Mote Solo, No Girlfriend Since Birth. This is an indie game, fairly recently introduced in 2021. This game was one of the games that we invited over to Corfin Special Game Week, which is the indie game exhibition where we had Korean and Finnish indie games exhibit together. And this is a full motion video game where it's a full motion video game. So you watch the cinema and you select the choices and you gradually progress to the story. There's multiple different endings that you can progress, and the story involves this guy who never had girlfriend in his entire life trying on a blind date.
Oh, no.
And then you have to help him to find him a girlfriend, to make this blind date be successful. And it's emotionally very hard because this guy constantly messes up, and you feel the character in there, and this is a very interesting perspective. Like, this is one of the unique Korean games I never get to play for the past few years, where I actually emerged to the character, that I want to help this guy. And then what interesting thing about this game is that they incorporate a lot of like outside game components together in the game. So in the game you can check the guy's Instagram. You can also find his chat log in the game of figuring out what this character is. Who is this guy's about? And there's a lot of different elements in there that you can enjoy, that not just the game world, but also associate together with us real world, and therefore making us feel more connected with this character. And that's also what I found quite interesting and something that haven't been done very much here over there in Korean game scene, but something that we have to keep in mind of, that we have to try more different genre. We probably want to go beyond the box and try out many different genres and games that doesn't necessarily have to be competitive. And that's something that I want to raise for this jam. That this is the last slide. I want to ask our jammers, now that we're in together with multicultural jammers out there, I want you guys to ask around what game means in your language, in your culture. And again, this could be very different. You shouldn't be very biased on certain concept. There's many different way how fun can be interpreted around the world. So discuss about what is compelling and what is fun game in your context. Do discuss about that and learn that. And then try to find maybe like a compelling storytelling from the jam, but it doesn't necessarily have to be story-driven game. Don't worry, you have your free choice. But that's something that I would like to see a bit in this is jam. And for Korean gamers, Korean jammers gathered here today, let's try not to be too competitive here.
I love it how you emphasize that.
Yeah. So scope it down, and you don't have to win. Again, in Finland, Game Jam doesn't have winners. They don't rank who's the best gamers or not. So let's try to enjoy. Yeah. That's what I'm kind of trying to emphasize here. I think like
I'm a little bit scared now of the Koreans.
No, that wasn't the whole purpose.
But okay. I totally agree with you. Game jams are not competitions in Finland. We do have competitive jams too, but we never like really go like neck to neck, like really hard on the jams. And it's very important that you challenge yourself in the way that you feel mostly kind of enjoying. So game jamming and making is a really fun thing to do. There is a lot of things that you can learn during the jam, and that's the kind of the fulfillment of participating to game jams as well. Yeah. But I totally love how Solip is kind of really trying to put out there that yes, competition, but also let's not just be as vicious, I guess, as the South Koreans would be.
Everyone.
So I have my, so we could go to the notes view here, and I've tried to make sense. How do we translate your design tradition reflections into jam kind of a fitting? So I have, it's quite interesting what has happened in there. I don't know if the Finns have to tone down the perkele, and then the Koreans have to tone down the competition, but maybe there will be something super fun that comes out of these. So I had the beginning of the presentations for each of you is like Quirky Finnish games. I think that also describes a lot of our history in games, not just your selection, Mikko, but bedroom coders as a kind of a starting point, and then the starting point for Solip is very competitive Korean players and content-heavy games. Those are the kind of the frameworks. And then I put Mikko had the demo scene, the exhibit 1A and exhibit B. So the demo scene aesthetics, and then the Suomi Finland perkele. And then I actually counted 3 things from Solip's presentation, but maybe we can edit that if you don't agree. So compete together, content heavy, and storytelling. And maybe even like an emphasis on the storytelling. That's one of the things that we, and at some point I think that the Finnish games are not that great with storytelling. We don't have a lot of like this character like anime tradition that the Western countries are not as good as on the kind of side of Japan, Korea, I don't know, Chinese games as well. So I guess like storytelling is more like, I don't know, given in your cultural things, and not as much like we don't talk that much. So it's just perkele and that's it.
Yeah, because when Remedy like started doing these very story-heavy games, that was a new thing. It was
Yeah.
not something that was traditionally
Yeah.
done here.
Yeah.
And then they went with Max Payne and
Yeah.
Alan Wake and so on. So it was very different, not a departure from the tradition.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
like you said, in Japan, it's always been
Yeah.
the story has been always.
So how is it, Solip? Is it like similar to Japanese games that there's like RPGs as well in the
RPG, so
Yeah.
MMORPG, I
Yeah.
would say in Korea,
Yeah.
MMORPG is quite strong, obviously, but the thing is that in terms of MMO,
Mm.
story is a huge component in there, but not necessarily the core.
The core
function,
of
a
it. It
core
would
of it.
still be competitive in itself.
Well, I would enjoy play online games that have like raids, of
competition.
course. If there's no raids, if there's no competition, why would I play it? Like I said, game.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's like to go a little bit like a repeat on the Mikko's part. Demo scene aesthetics is a little bit maybe difficult to grasp if you have never done any demos or watched the demos, even on the videos. But I put something like tunnel effects and bullet hell at least for easy
That's a
starters.
starting point, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to find like material on the demo scene if you want to like experiment or explore the aesthetics.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, if you go to puet.net or demozoo.org, you can
Yeah.
find like decades worth of material to
We'll
look
link
at. So
those on our Discord so that people can find more. But I put that push tech to the limits of illusion, exploring the tech. I guess this could also apply, as I said, with the tiny tools of Game Jam games, that you could just explore the wrong ways of using the tech.
Like I thought that was a very good point that you made, that you can just decide to use something the wrong way.
Yeah.
That's always what's been done in the demo scene. Like, you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to write here in memory, and then they do exactly that and see what happens.
So use the deck wrong way. I mean, I also use like on construct. I use bullet for other things that I don't have bullets in my game, so they are just moving objects. Anyway, Suomi, Finland, Perkele. I guess like the easiest way would be rally English. I guess there will be volunteers in our Discord to do voice acting for whoever wants some Finnish. But it's like just Finnish words. That's super easy to put in your game. If you're Finn. I guess we can help with that. The maximum Perkele, I'm not absolutely sure how do we translate that, but that was the
Yeah.
But I'd like to turn this around, if I may, because I'd like to see what's the maximum Perkele for Korea.
Oh, okay.
Because I would like to see what would be like a pastiche, like a parody
Of
of
the
life in South Korea. In a like you can pick an era, like what was life in Korea in the 90s? What was funny about that? What was the 2000s? How would you make a like what was everyone trying to achieve? What were the problems? Could you make a game about that? So I wanted to bring that out just to contrast with Finnish.
Right. Like a cynical view, but it also review back and what is Perkele in that time of Korea.
Yeah,
and
it's
then
so
to be honest,
difficult to
I don't.
explain.
Yeah, but then to be honest, we don't have that much type of like reality reflected in games that much. Like a game is usually very fantasy driven, virtual world, which is one of the reasons why like we discussed this together on the Kaiser before. The Sims wasn't that much of a big deal.
Because reality wasn't.
Because it's why do I have to do the reality stuff again in virtual? Well, that was my first reaction when I first encountered Sims back in those days.
Yeah.
So yeah, we never actually had those. So it would be really fun to like find what
would be the my summer car of South Korea? Like what do you have anything like that from the 90s? You would have to think about it.
PC Bang Rally.
Oh yeah, something like that.
Like you go
simulation of PC Bang.
Yeah,
and
then
wasn't Gangnam Style? Wasn't it like a social commentary song as well?
Like our entire music video, you see the parody of it. But then
so
Gangnam itself is very rich, privileged place.
But what I understood was that he was making a comment on the lifestyle. So isn't that something you could like sort of work from? Because
it's kind of weird that the very rich, money-driven lifestyle would be the Perkele of South Korea.
Yeah, but it's like it's just
cynical.
One of those things. Because these sort of games like have been coming out. Like there's Jalopy, where you drive in a fictional Eastern Europe. In a fictional Trabant, and then because that's
very close.
That's close to my summer car as well, and it's also making like a social political comment.
Mm.
And
bit
then
of a
there are
parody.
games like Papers, Please, and
Oh, yeah.
so on. So this kind of thing, and it links very much with the
Right,
Maximum
right.
Perkele.
And there are also
Yeah,
some people that says like, you know,
Papers,
this-
please, for Korea would be
Yeah.
quite of the papers, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, brutal. Yeah.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have brutal. Like when Mai says competition, it's
Yep,
about joy of winning or losing. But like again, nori doesn't imply that it's brutal. It doesn't have to be brutal. You
Mm.
could just be like, oh, I lost. Call
Yeah.
it a day. Let's play again.
I was
So-
thinking the most stereotypical thing that the people think about Korea's the
Squid
border
Game?
border between
Ah.
those two countries.
Right,
But
right.
we'll stay on the southern side.
Yeah, again, whenever I say Korea, guys, this is about South Korea.
Yeah. So to go into the compete together, I really love this. It's quite difficult to do in a game jam game where you would have like multiplayers. But we
Exactly.
have jammers that have done a lot of the multiplayer games. Also, it's easier nowadays.
Right. I
So
would say party game might be like
party
somewhat
game-
scoped down from like it's a multiplay, but you can enjoy it together. I
Into
would
it,
say
yeah.
party game could be a good scope
yeah.
for it.
Also, like I think that competitive games is quite easy to do. Also, with my skill sets, to do like a high score, and that could be used for a party game as well.
Mm.
Just you compete together in in 2 high scores, for instance. That would
Right.
be quite easy to do as a jam game.
Yeah.
And then content heavy. You already said that yourself. That it's quite difficult for a jam game. But I also would love to see like how do we do that in a jam setting that is like ridiculous amount of content in it. Maybe like
Procedural
super
generation.
procedural generation, of course, as well.
Open
Yeah.
world. Oh no.
But the thing is, like, constantly new stuff coming up, and maybe the game itself is so simple. So oftentimes when I participated to jams, I do graphics, and a lot of those graphics never go into the game. But maybe the game itself could be so simple, but the graphics could be like super a lot.
Yeah,
I don't know how
that's
that would
what-
fit to the
comes,
1K.
That comes back to the demo scene thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Oh,
you make
yeah.
a simple game, but you make it very, very beautiful. So
Oh, yeah,
everyone's
yeah.
like, oh, shiny.
I
Yeah.
put
that's
polish at one point here,
Mm.
but it's also a little bit of what goes like against game jams. But I would love to see this like really tiny game, absolutely horribly polished.
Yeah, because, well, basically, Stardust, the original Stardust, it was asteroids.
yeah.
But they just put so much effort into it
Yeah.
and made it an entirely new game.
Yeah.
Just by that, they added weapons, they did this and
Yeah.
that. But you could just have one scene. You could like leave out the proverbial tunnel sequence and just have the main screen and
Super
just,
polished.
Yeah, super polished.
Yeah, that's doable.
Yeah.
And then the storytelling, that's also difficult, but it could be easily combined with the Suomi-Finland Perkele.
Mm.
So that you tell a little bit different, like not the fantasy stories necessary, but the
Right.
stories of your life.
Because what I'm saying about is that it's a storytelling.
Mm.
Like not necessarily the story has to be built, but then how you deliver the story, how you emphasize the feeling, emotion, atmosphere in the game to deliver certain message. And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be like strict narrative structure. It could be
Mm-mm.
many different ways how to tell a story, like
Yeah.
like Journey. Back
Yeah,
in
yeah,
those
indeed.
days game that was very inspired.
And I love that you had examples that had social media kind of references or utilizing even.
Mm.
So it can be a bit difficult to do in a jam game, but you definitely can put it as part of your stories. That it's about the social media. You could have videos and also like pictures of actual people instead of
right.
like 3D. All right, so that's kind of my interpretation of what you told me today, and for the rest of the viewers, what do you think? Should we add some kind of anchors? We are absolutely over time already. I wanted to talk so much more about these things with you guys. So this is an absolute treat for me, and I really love it that there's like a new and fresh and subjective outtakes on this, so that it's not just repeating what we've heard already. So yeah, do you want to add something? Because I'm gonna give this image for all the jammers and the viewers in our Discord channel, so we can pick it from there and start jamming.
Yep. I'm just quite excited about it and looking forward to what type of
I'm
things
slightly
that
afraid.
what have we
Terrified.
done? What have we done?
Well, one thing that is very important to remember, that when you do a jam game and you have two countries and their design traditions combined, you have to remember that you can't use the copyrighted stuff. So, and it's very clear, for instance, for the IP-driven things, that don't do a Angry Birds game with an Angry Birds graphics. You can have a little bit of reference there, but typically the visuals, the imagery, sometimes colors even, and the names of the things that move in these games, they are protected by copyright law, so those cannot be used. But you can definitely do something kind of honoring the homage for these characters that are in your nostalgic memories of your traditions. So that's one thing to remember. And obviously in jams you can use a lot of things that are out there. You always have to pay attention that you don't use a lot of or at all of the things that you can't share for the others. Yep. It can be tempted, but it's one thing very important to remember. So what is more safer to copy from other games is game mechanics.
Game mechanics, design.
Do we have some questions? I've been so completely immersed with chatting with you and listening to the presentations that should we kind of check a little bit of the comments before we go?
Or mostly comments.
There's a lot of comments.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions for our presenters here, just write them fast into the chat and there is a delay of 10 seconds in the streaming, which is a little bit annoying, but we have a time. We always have a bit of time for questions. Oh, question to all panelists. Especially with the Suomi Perkele featuring prominently, are there some stereotypes associated with your home country or culture that you'd recommend jammers to avoid?
Oh,
it's almost like giving people guns.
Yeah, so
like, what do you want to avoid?
This is the question from the Tenord.
Yes.
I don't care.
I was kind of expecting that thing. So basically, I think that I also wouldn't mind that we would overexploit the shy and socially awkward Finns thing. That is the prominent, that is a very dominant stereotype of the Finns.
Yeah, it's everything's been done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as long as you're making a point, it's fine.
Yeah. One thing that I wouldn't touch for, which is not entirely just Finnish, but the indigenous kind of imageries. So those kind of things, not that cool to use without you being part of the culture, knowing exactly what you do. But otherwise, we are not that picky for. There was a story before the streaming about the Karelian pie in a event that it wasn't really working that well for the pastry. But I think that is not insulting either.
No, it's just like it's fine.
Yeah. So there's nothing really that pressing, but stay away from the kind of indigenous imageries of like the Sami dress, for instance.
It has to be accurate.
Yeah.
Or like try not to fake it. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. Is there something that we should avoid from the South Korean?
In general, don't make joke about North Korea in front of South Korean because we also don't know what is going on over there, and then
too
very
close.
And sarcastic jokes about there are games or Hollywood films that portray very like funny joke comedy films about North Korea, and then for us South Korean viewers, we don't get it. We don't know where the fun is coming from there.
Oh yeah.
So. During this jam, if you like try to make some jokes about North Korea to South Korean, we're probably not gonna understand it. Or not feel the funness of it.
Yeah.
So if you wanna make something intercultural and make fun, then do reference like Gangnam or South Korean contacts down there. It's gonna be way more straightforward for us to give more values and bring more ideas from there because we also can't go to the north. We also don't know anything about them. So
I think it's in all of the movie representation of the South Koreans. There's always a reference to North Korea. There's always something
about it. And I also noticed that because Finland is close to Russia next door and is very close to North Korea.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes I can make a fun of it, but then there's always this one moment like.
Yeah, we're not. I would say that we're not completely open for Russian jokes either.
Yeah, it's similar.
We kind of try to
similar
maybe
to that.
Avoid it a bit as a discussion point. Yeah.
So you don't want to make that much jokes about Mr. Putin in Finland as well as and also in Korea. You don't want to make too much fun about
too close.
Yeah. So there's always this clinching moment. We were trying not to censor you guys, but then it's just
Yeah.
a little bit of how the joke
I think
was.
it's just that these days, these are not us trying to censor you. This is us trying to say to you that don't do something that you would regret yourself, because you don't necessarily know what you're going for. So it's a very good question. Thanks, Tedanord, for that. I think we will move all the discussion to Discord. And I'm just excited, and also I might be doing something myself with, I don't know, tunnel effects, if I am able to do any of that with my very poor skills with construct.
And we're quite over time, and we
Yeah.
have to move on to brainstorming and
Indeed.
teaming session for our jammer. So
Yeah.
on Discord. So
On
yeah.
Discord. So move all your kind of digital asses to the Discord channel so that we can start jamming with you. It's quite late already in South Korea, and well, we are happy here in Finland. It's 3:30.
Yep.
So thank you, Mikko, a lot for
Thanks for
your
having me.
participation, and we will see you again in 1 week. And we will take a look at the Suomi Perkele storytelling demos in aesthetics, games with a lot of compete together elements in 1 week's time. And we'll see what we have more to share and learn from those. So game jams are always learning experiences, and game jams of others are also learning experiences for us. So stay tuned, and
Thank you
I
very
guess
much.
that's it.
Yeah,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
that's exciting. Thank you. Nice jamming.
Bye.